All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Welcome to the In Conversation with Caryl M Stern, discussion and Q&A, the first event of the 2020 Belvac-Mansfield Symposium. I am Meg Rickman. I serve Iowa Wesleyan as its Vice President for Marketing, Communications, and Enrollment here, and a member of the Symposium leadership team. I'm delighted to see you here this afternoon. Today, we honor the legacy of Belvac-Mansfield. We celebrate her willingness to take action to make a world a better place. Belvac-Mansfield was an 1866 graduate of Iowa Wesleyan University and the first woman to pass the bar exam in the United States in 1869. She is also recognized for her work in 1870 when in June, Bell served as the presiding president of the state's first enfranchisement convention in Mount Pleasant. This two-day event yielded the establishment of the Iowa Women's Suffrage Association. The speakers highlighted at the annual symposium, as well as the recipients of Belvac-Mansfield Award, are persons of strong social conscience, whose leadership through the world, action, and service embodies the spirit of Bell. Their work has contributed to a more humane world, and their example inspires others to conscious and humane action. Before introducing our event moderator, I want to thank those individuals and groups who have made a safe and accessible symposium possible. Thank you to the team of National Management who keeps our facilities clean and sanitized. Also, thank you to Dr. Dwayne Frazier, Wyatt Gatlin, Dylan Galler, and Jasmine Rodriguez, who are managing our audio-video system throughout the symposium. Let's give them and show us some appreciation for them. Thank you. Today's moderator is Mike Patton, General Manager of Walmart Distribution Center here in Mount Pleasant, as well as an honorary chair of the 2020 Belvac-Mansfield Symposium with his wife, Vanessa. Mike grew up in San Diego, California, before moving with his family to Northwest Arkansas in 1989. He served 5.5 years in the U.S. Army Intelligence Corps and 7 years as a police officer with positions as patrol, as a detective, and as a patrol sergeant. Mike began his Walmart career in 2004. In 2007, he joined the logistics division as a divisional senior manager in asset protection, supporting 9 distribution centers in Texas. In 2010, he was promoted to the position of Senior Director of Compliance, Safety, and Asset Protection, where he supported 62 distribution centers across the country. After additional service in Chino, California, Mike transferred to our Mount Pleasant Distribution Center in November of 2017. Please help me welcome Mr. Mike Patton.
All right, thank you, Meg. I'm really honored to be here, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak with Caryl today. I'm interested to see what she has to teach us today. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Caryl M Stern, who's the Executive Director of the Walton Family Foundation. The Walton Family Foundation is at its core a family-led foundation. 3 generations of the descendants of its founders, Sam and Helen Walton, and their spouses work together to lead the foundation and create access to opportunity for people and communities. As you may know, Sam Walton also founded the retailer Walmart. Caryl is joined the Walton Family Foundation as Executive Director in 2019. A dynamic change maker, Caryl has dedicated her career to helping others through education, compassion, advocacy, and rolling up her sleeves. From 2007 to 2019, she served as the President and CEO of UNICEF USA, an organization that supports UNICEF's life-saving work to put children first. A sought-after public speaker on the topics of kids helping kids, children and philanthropy, anti-bullying, and international development, Caryl was invited to present at the White House's inaugural summit on the United States of Women and was named one of the 25 women changing the world in 2017 by People magazine, among many other recognitions. As the Executive Director of the Walton Family Foundation, Caryl oversees the organization's work in three primary areas: improving K through 12 education, protecting rivers and oceans, and the communities they support, and investing in the Foundation's home region of Northwest Arkansas in the Arkansas-Mississippi River Delta. In 2018, the Foundation awarded more than $595 million in grants to further its mission. Please join me in helping welcome Caryl M Stern.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, good morning, Caryl. Thank you for joining us here today at Iowa Wesleyan University. I can tell you it's an extreme honor to be here with you, and we're looking forward to our discussion. We have some great questions from our Iowa Wesleyan University business students, so why don't we just jump right in. So, Caryl, our first grouping of questions is really going to center around professional career and development. So, to begin our conversation, can you share who you are, your role, and a little background about the Walton Family Foundation?
Sure, but I think you did a really good job of that in my introduction. So I am the executive director of the Walton Family Foundation, which is, in a short sentence, we are committed, to providing access to opportunity for people, but also for communities at large through our K-12 work, our environment work, in particular a focus on water, and then in our home region of Northwest Arkansas and the Delta. In addition to that, I'm a mom, I'm a grandmom, I have 3 sons and 2 grandchildren, married to a terrific man who is a real estate developer, and not sure what else I can tell you.
Very nice. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your education and training, if you don't mind?
Sure. I have a bachelor's degree in the very lucrative field of studio art, and soon after graduating with a degree in painting and realizing that rent was not paid easily by selling my paintings, went back to graduate school and got a master's in college student personnel. Started the first 10 years of my career in higher ed, most recently as Dean of Students at Polytechnic University. And I had an opportunity to do a lot of volunteer work during that time in what is today called DEI, but at that time was just called anti-bias work, and began to really take that on seriously and do a study of it, and ended up getting an opportunity to go to the Anti-Defamation League, where I was tasked with creating a curriculum initially for elementary school, ultimately for K-12 and college, around how do we empower people to either give up their biases or to not develop them to begin with. We designed curriculum materials, we designed teacher training materials, we designed training programs, we worked with television stations across the country, and ultimately to date 450,000 teachers are using our curriculum materials, reaching about 20 million kids every day. And then I did, at a certain point in my academic career, go back for my doctoral studies, did complete all of my coursework in higher ed admin as well. So that's kind of my training, went from the ADL to UNICEF and from UNICEF to where I am now.
That's outstanding. After reading your bio, I was prepared for this. I will tell you that you're among the top of the list I'd love to have lunch with sometime, because I think your background is so interesting. And I think if we were having that lunch, one of my first questions would really be about UNICEF. I think that's such fascinating work that you did, such important work. And so, can you share with our students today about your former role in UNICEF?
Sure. I went to UNICEF not 100% sure of what to expect. I had not done humanitarian aid work before. I went as the chief operating officer originally, and 3 weeks into my job, the person who had wooed me to the job for over a year came in and said, "You're going to kill me, but I just took a job with Bill Gates and I'm leaving." And so I was named acting CEO, and ultimately a year later, I was given the privilege to be the president and CEO. But in that year, in an effort to understand the job, I really traveled the world, spent a lot of time talking to people and learning so I could justify that I actually had some vision for what the job could be. It was, and probably always will be, the most amazing 14 years of my life. I had the privilege to visit 45 countries in that time, to see how we're all the same and to see how we're each unique and different, to begin to really understand that, children are 100% of our future. Best investment we can make is in the world's children. and to really understand that I had a lot more to learn from them than they did from me, and to participate in responding to epidemics, to floods, to earthquakes, to famines, to be on immunization campaigns, and then to be out in America attempting to get Americans to understand that our children are our greatest gift, and to get them to separate children from politics and to say, you know, the only side we're on is the side of a child, and we're going to try to make the world the best that it can be for them. So really an amazing 14 years.
That's amazing. I tell you, you know, to leave a fingerprint on an organization is one thing, to leave a fingerprint on a nation is another, and to leave a fingerprint on a global footprint, which is what you've been doing through your work, I think is extraordinary. In that vein, is there any experience, trip, or project that made the biggest impression during your time with UNICEF?
You know, I could probably tell you stories about my travels for the rest of your life and mine, but there are two stories, and they're pretty on opposite ends of extreme, actually, that left real impressions on me. First was a horrific experience. It was in Sierra Leone. I was there part of a tetanus response, and it was the first time in my life I had to watch a child. And I had to watch a child die of a disease that less than $5 would have provided everything that child needed, either to have been immunized or to have been saved, but neither was available. The child was 6 days old. The baby's mom had given birth in a mud hut like most women in the village, and had cut the umbilical cord and then packed the wound with mud, which is tradition. However, tetanus is a disease that lives in spores in dirt, and had unknowingly infected her own child with tetanus. And it was a horrific experience to sit in this dark room with this woman. She didn't speak English. I did not speak her language. And all I could do was hold her hand. And she had no idea who I was. I mean, you know, I was just someone who appeared this day, and there was no way to even offer words. And because tetanus is a disease that makes a baby super sensory, you couldn't hold the baby, you couldn't sing to the baby, the sound would hurt the baby, you couldn't, you know, make the baby warmer or turn a light on because there wasn't a light to turn on. You could just sit in the darkness and watch a baby in extreme pain, and an 18-year-old mom in more pain, if that's possible. And I realized the baby had passed before the mom did. And I had to go and find a healthcare worker who could speak her language to tell her. And respectfully, I did not go back in the room when they told her. But that woman just guttural scream when she learned that she had lost her child stayed with me for the rest of my career at UNICEF, will probably stay with me for the rest of my life. This was in my second year on the job, and I think it is what propelled me to work hard, to keep going, to say, you know, we don't get to choose where we're born, and through the grace of God, I got the good fortune to be born in a place where I never had to face what this baby faced, what this woman faced, and that there was just something really wrong with that. And it changed who I am, and it changed how I work, and it changed how I see the world. So that was probably the most impactful trip. But then on the flip side, and actually ironically in my last year on the job, I was working in a refugee camp in Jordan, and we get up really early, you work all day, you're just so busy that you don't even realize the day goes by. And there are always a lot of kids hanging on you when you're wearing a blue UNICEF shirt. They know our shirts, they know who we are, they want to hold your hand, they want to, you know, hold your arm, your leg. You're kind of walking around with this pack of kids attached to you. But there's also kids who walk behind you, and there was a little boy who walked behind me, and all day long, and at the end of the day, we realized we had never eaten all day. So these little kids had never eaten all day, and with him was his older sister and a baby, and I had this little biscuit in my backpack, and I took it out and I gave it to him, thinking he'd just run off real quick and gobble it up, because he hadn't complained. It was clear he was used to not eating. And he was about 3 years old, and he took the biscuit and he opened it up and he broke it in half. And nobody said a word to this child. He just handed half to the baby. And I stood there and in awe that he had nothing. This child was walking around with no shoes. It was cold. He had no coat. He hadn't eaten all day. But what little he had, he just knew it was better to share it. And it was the most amazing moment. I mean, we all cried watching this happen, and it just renewed my faith. It just made me believe that anything is possible.
I don't know if I'm trying to get you to tear up here or not, but those are extraordinary stories. I'm sitting here looking at your banner, Caryl, and you have a quote on your banner. I don't know if the audience can see it, probably not, but it says, even people in the most hopeless and helpless places manifest a tremendous impulse to work together for the betterment of all. And I think that story exemplifies what's on your banner, and that's amazing. As we heard Meg introduce Bill Mansfield and talked about her accomplishments, there's no doubt that she faced extraordinary obstacles in her own right and was really a path blazer. And so, as a woman, can you tell us about the types of obstacles you've run into as you've moved up?
Sure, and I have to say, and I probably, I wanted to say this at the top. I'm really honored, and I listen to you talk about that even more so. What a trailblazer and just phenomenal woman. I had the privilege at the age of 28 to be named Dean of Students at Polytechnic University, and I did not know at the time, the school was over 120 years old at the time, and I did not know I was the first woman ever to be named Dean at the college. And I found that out the next day when the New York Daily News ran an article that said sex barrier falls, and I'm reading the article and they're writing about me, so it was pretty funny. But I would sit at my desk in my office and people would kind of bound in and they'd say, "I'm here to see the dean." And I'd say, "Well, you're looking at her." And they would laugh and they'd say, "No, really, I'm here to see the dean." Like, they couldn't get it around their heads that I was the dean. And some people used to say it was because I was young, and I'm sure that contributed to it, but it was 1980s and there just weren't a lot of women in academia in dean's jobs and very few in engineering schools in particular. And so I felt like I constantly in those years had to list my credentials. Yes, I went for my doctoral studies. Yes, I have a master's. Yes, I have 10 years of work, in ways that a man didn't have to. He put on his suit and tie, he came to work, and people assumed he had those credentials.
That's absolutely correct.
Can you tell us about when you were in college and as a young adult, Caryl, who did you look up to and seek advice from as you were maneuvering through this world that you were living in?
Definitely, my biggest mentor was my mom. And tonight I know I have some formal comments to make, and I am going to talk about her. She was a Holocaust survivor, and she came to this country and could have lived her life really bitterly, and instead lived her life with the belief that she was saved for a reason, and was thankful for every moment she ever got. And she taught us to stop and smell the roses every time we saw them. And I think that lesson is the one I hope I've passed on to my children. Jobs come and go, but people don't. And beautiful sunsets are a gift. And she just definitely made us believe in the possibilities of anything. So she's still alive. She's 87 years old and still remains my biggest hero. And then I think in addition to that, there were lots of different people. I had faculty members. I had a professor in my second year of college who was a theater professor, and it was the time in my life I think I was finding my own voice, and I didn't quite know how to find it. And he made me do things, go to restaurants I'd never gone to, order the food I'd never tasted, see a show that wasn't of interest to me just because it would stretch my brain, and really just rounded me out. And in my sophomore year, I was doing stage managing. I wasn't really even ready to get out on the stage, and I was stage managing a show and doing sets, and the lead ended up 2 nights before the opening of the show not being able to fulfill his role. And And I went on as a male lead, first time ever in a performance. And as I was walking up the stage, and he said, just remember, when you get out there, you don't forget lines. You just don't care to say them. It's all about attitude. And I think that's the other person I have always kept in my brain in everything I do now, Like, if you just stand there and say, well, I don't know who's supposed to talk, somebody's going to fill in. And so I definitely looked up to him as well.
Awesome. So, if as you took your cues from your mother, and she obviously imprinted a lot on you, you were also a mother and grandmother, as I heard in your introduction. So, can you tell us about the challenges you run into with balancing work and being that role model for your kids as well?
Absolutely. I think throughout my career, my joke with my friends, especially young women working for me as they are about to have their first child, is always give up not feeling guilty, because you're going to feel guilty the rest of your life. You will be at work and think you should be home. You will be home and think you should be at work. I have a phenomenal husband. It is the secret of the success of my career is I have a true partner in our kids. But at the same time, I'm 63 years old. I grew up in an in-between period. I always say our mothers wore girdles and my younger sisters burned their bras, and we grew up somewhere in between. We were told we could be anything and do anything, but there was no path to follow. There was no book to tell us what to do. So you were kind of paving the road and driving at the same moment. And over the course of my lifetime, especially with UNICEF, I have always had a policy of making the decision that my family comes first. No matter what I'm doing, my family comes first. So if my phone rings, my kids have their own ring, my husband has his own ring, I know it's them, and that phone gets answered. I don't care where I am. I've done it at the White House. I've done it in the UN General Assembly. I will take that call. And they know you don't call just to say hi during the workday. You call for a reason. But I have done math homework on a satellite phone sitting in a refugee camp in Darfur, because it's my job as a mom to do math homework with my kids, not expect somebody else to do it. So, I think when people ask me, how did you find work-life balance? My answer is always, some days better than others. There were days I wondered, do my socks match? Do I have shoes on at all? Walking out of the house, because it just felt like way too many things to think about in the beginning of the day. And there were other days that I took that moment and said, oh, I can do this, Just depends on the day.
That's amazing. Caryl, I'm gonna request my own ringtone. So if I call you, you're with Doug McMillan or somebody like that, you can step out and take that call. That would be amazing. So this is a tough question, I think, because I think you've got a lot of advice. But is there any one piece of advice that sticks out as the best piece of advice you've ever been given during your career?
Well, besides you don't forget lines, the other piece of advice that I would offer in keeping with the theme of this award, when I became dean at Polytechnic, there was a Monday morning dean's meeting. And every Monday morning it started with kind of a wrap-up of the football games from the weekend and a little bit about who had done what over the weekend. And it was kind of like this boys' club, because there'd never been a girl in the room. And so the first meeting I was really quiet. I knew nothing about football. I then bought a book, started watching games, started really trying to fit into the crowd there. And one of the women who was an assistant to one of the deans, an older woman, her name is Helen Warren, she took me aside one day and she said, stop it. She said, if they wanted a boy, they would have hired a boy. They hired a girl, be a girl. And it was like an amazing light bulb went off in my head of, you know what, she's right. They knew who I was when they hired me. And I wasn't hired because I could play football or knew football. And so I just let go of it and said, I'm going to be myself. And I have been myself ever since. Sometimes it gets me in trouble because I will say what I think and I am who I am. And the older you get, the easier it is to do that, because you start to care a little less about what people think and a lot more about how you feel about things. But it was great advice to just, be yourself.
I like that a lot. So Caryl, we're going to transition And I'll tell you, one of my, probably the biggest highlights of my career is getting the opportunity to fly with Miss Helen, with her two nurses before she passed. And we were on a jet heading to Jackson Hole, Wyoming on a family event. And so that was an extreme honor. So we're going to switch over now to the Walton Family Foundation, which obviously you get to represent the family and a lot of things going on across the globe. And so in 2019, as I said in my intro, the Walton Family Foundation awarded more than $595 million in grants to further its mission. How many grantees are supported by this funding? And can you help everyone here listening understand the difference in size, scope, et cetera, of these grantees?
So 2019 represents a little over 900 organizations, and they really range the full gamut in size and scope. Some are national groups, some regional groups, some are local groups, some are very individualized projects. The dollars go to three primary areas, which you said in the introduction, but I'll round it out a little bit. Excuse me, first and foremost, K-12 education, which was, Helen and Sam's passion as well. And it is about creating access to equal opportunities, solid schools, equal learning for all children, school choice, understanding that not all kids learn in the same way, and making sure they have access to what they need to be successful. The environment, which is predominantly a focus on water, not only on water protection, but also on good agricultural practices, our oceans, how we fish, how we sustain water. And then the home region of Northwest Arkansas and the Delta, which, is where Sam and Helen made their life and created the Walmart industry, and really feel the family has a great loyalty to the region.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And so are there a couple, 2 or 3 accomplishments this year that you would consider to be the Walton Families Foundation top 2 to 3?
Yeah, one being COVID related, but I'll say that, but I would say that other couple of things that I would look back on is we deployed over $20 million to support literally thousands of teachers, parents, students, and communities in the months after the pandemic hit. And I think our ability to turn on a dime and recognize that, yes, there is a pandemic and that's the crisis, but the crisis within the crisis is the interruption of school and learning and the safety net that school provides with regard to meals and psychosocial support of our nation's children. And it's, thematically continuing kind of, I guess, what I believe in that, an investment in our kids. So really proud of that. Also really proud of the progress the foundation has been a part of in the sustainable seafood industry, and recognizing that we have to keep enough fish in the ocean to keep the fish healthy. And we also have to sustain a fishing industry. And sometimes those are at odds. And so our ability to support the fishing industry in a way that enables the ocean to continuously replenish itself is something that I'm really excited about. And then we did some really interesting research this year too, and I think that's the other piece I'm really proud of.
Yeah, that's incredible. This is the part of our company that I really am proudest about is kind of how we're involved in so many different aspects of making this a better globe for all. So that's incredible work. The Walt Foundation really recently released some new research examining millennials and Gen Z's views on their future opportunities in the American dream. Can you tell us a little bit more about that research and what are some of the key takeaways from that research?
Great, yeah, really exciting research. We commissioned a group called Echelon Insights to conduct a study of what young Americans, millennials, and Gen Zs, what do they think about their future? What do they see as the prospects for success? And what do they want out of life? What are the obstacles to that? And we learned a lot from it, and some of it, reflectively not as surprising, but initially surprising. So despite the fact that these two generations are growing up, in the shadow of 9/11, in the shadow of 2 major wars, they have lived through a financial crisis and now a global pandemic, millennials and Gen Zs are optimistic. And they're optimistic that they really still believe that the American dream is within their reach. But I think that they define the American dream differently, and I think that was really interesting. Like, we found that nearly half of the young people we surveyed, they expect to have a better life than their parents. it was even higher among Black, Hispanic, Latino, and Asian respondents, that this sense of optimism, their definition of the American dream, it's not, my generation's definition of an American dream was a house with a picket fence, 2.5 children, a dog, food on the table, your kids go to college. That was our definition. Today, I think that the two generations are defining it as the opportunity to build a life that they dream of, a life on their terms. But they do believe that the possibility is there, the access is there. And I think for us, that was very affirming that, some of the work that all of philanthropy, parents, industry, all of us are doing in society is making a difference.
I think about that, Carol, from my perspective as we hire coming out of college and stuff. I'll tell you, that's one of the most invigorating parts is I think it's the most incredibly important part is attitude, right? And I think what you just talked about, what your research showed, is really speaking to attitude. And I think that that attitude is so critical in building that foundation to build upon as they launch into their careers. So we sit here today remotely via Zoom, and so with masks on, and so obviously we're in a different world than when we were planning this, Meg. Late last year, early this year. So, and that difference is obviously COVID-19. So, can you tell us a little bit about how your foundation, how the Walt Foundation, responded to COVID-19 and continues to respond to the pandemic for all?
Sure. Well, first of all, we created a COVID response fund of $35 million from the foundation, but in addition to that, the Walton family members supported more than $180 million of COVID response. But we took a step back and said, first and foremost, we want to support our grantees to do the work that they've already been committed to doing. And so we asked our team, our staff, to do double jobs. Keep the work moving that you have on your docket, but go back to every one of our grantees and talk to them. What do they need? How do we help them? How do we best support them through this pandemic? How do we take care of our own staff and our own team, too, at the same time? We also really, I worked with a group out of New England on Bridgespan on really, how to think about giving in this period. And one of the lessons that we talked about was do what you do best. Don't start to do something you don't do. So if you're not a food bank, let the food bank be the food bank. Look at what you do and how do you do it in a pandemic. And so most of our support to our grantees was through that, was enabling our grantees to do what we do best. And then our special funding really went towards ensuring that kids had access to learning, ensuring psychosocial support to children because there is no safety net for them at the moment, and then making sure food is available in communities, making sure that people are being sustained through this very, very terribly rough period.
Yeah, it's incredible times we find ourselves in, and God willing, we'll get through this soon. So, in your current role, Caryl, obviously you went from a huge global impact with UNICEF to still a global reach with the Walt Foundation, and really are the face of the giving arm of the world's biggest and best retailer. And so, with that, I'm sure there's a lot of challenging pieces, but what would you consider to be your most challenging part of your current role?
Well, this year, definitely the pandemic was a challenge. How do you keep the wheels moving while you're still trying to do something else? And for me, because I came on board and had 5 full weeks in the office, and then the pandemic hit, getting to know my staff, getting to know the Walt family, getting to establish the relationship with the grantees without being able to sit down, break bread together, actually talk with one another, has been really challenging. I think the other part of the job will always be, there's always a great deal of need. You can't fund everything. Setting priorities for your time, for your dollars, for your efforts, where you use your voice, how you use your voice is a daily challenge.
Yeah, I can't even imagine, Caryl, sitting in your chair as you look at all the worthwhile projects being asked for funding and having to sift through those, and to your point, having to prioritize what's a need, and that's got to be extremely extremely challenging, and thank you for the work you're doing. So we're going to transition to our last group of questions from our students today. This is really about this whole idea of looking forward. And so with that, what advice would you give our senior college student as they're about to graduate and face an economic world of real uncertainty?
I guess I would say, again, I'm 63. When I look back, I spent a lot more time at work than I ever thought I would. So choose your career wisely, but don't assume as you graduate that what you do next year is what you're going to do the rest of your life. Look at what you want to do next year and do that, and take it one step at a time. I had 10 years in higher ed and 3 different jobs. I went from that to civil rights and human rights work at ADL. I went from that to humanitarian aid at UNICEF. And then I went from that to the privilege of leading the Walton Family Foundation. There's a theme, but they're dramatically different kinds of jobs. I never envisioned when I walked also over that stage and got my first diploma in painting that I would end up in the job I'm in now. And so I really think you got to be willing to take calculated risks, and you have to like what you're doing, because all the money in the paycheck isn't going to matter if you go to work every day and you're not fulfilled. And so, I would say take the time to look at the totality of a position. And even if you do it for a short period and it doesn't work out and you do something else after that, learn from it, move on.
I think it's such sage advice. I'm with you, because I would never, from a foxhole to sitting in a police car to sitting in Iowa Wesleyan University. If you would have told me I would be here today, back then, I would have thought you were crazy. So I think it's really sage advice. What do you believe are some of the challenges facing women specifically in the 21st century?
Some of them are the historical ones. There's still not enough respect for caregiving. So the woman who's choosing to stay home is still not thought of as having a career, when in fact she's actually fulfilling the most important job there is. She's raising her children, or she's caring for a parent or a sibling or a friend. There's not enough women at the table where decisions are being made. We still don't hold enough board seats. We still don't hold enough elected positions. Patriarchy is still alive and well in a lot of ways. Finding work-life balance, as I said, I have an amazing husband. He really does support my career, and it's made it possible. But there's still definitive roles for me and definitive roles for him. And we haven't solved the total sexism. There equal pay, equal power is not a guaranteed right for women still today.
Yeah, I agree. That's well said. And so, kind of along those lines, as we look at equity between the genders, what role do we all play in advancing that opportunity between the genders in this century?
I think for my generation, it's hand up, hand down. I was really lucky that a number of women, Helen Warren, who I spoke of earlier, who took me aside and gave me that advice. My mom, others who said, let me help you find your way along the way. And then I have tried really hard in my career to put the hand behind me as well and say, who do I pull up with me? It's recognizing that some of us get very lucky in life when we get the opportunity to have these amazing careers. And the best gift we can have for ourselves is to give it to somebody else and to share that power, to not always take the podium, but give it to somebody whose voice isn't being heard, whether that's in a classroom, in a boardroom, in a dining room, in a church room, just to recognize that we don't all have as much access to be heard, and we need to share the space.
I think that's fantastic advice.
I tell you, I look forward to the day where leaders across the globe understand the importance and power of a diverse team. And some of the best teams, high-performing teams I've ever worked on is diverse teams. I mean, that be it gender, to age, to race, to experience. And so it encompasses all that and do your best work when you do ensure that truly have that diversity in your team. So, as a mother and a grandmother, what do you hope is different and better for people?
You know, I look at my granddaughter and I think, boy, I'm some, you know, there used to be a cigarette called Virginia Slims. I'm dating myself here, and their theme was "You've come a long way, baby," because they were a thin, sexy cigarette. But anyway, in many ways, we've come a long way, baby. You know, I got my bachelor's degree in art because the field of architecture wasn't open to women. It never even dawned on me to be an architect, even though I was good in math and art. And for my granddaughter, she could be an architect. She wouldn't give two thoughts to that. I don't think she sees limitations in the opportunities. And I think that's really exciting. But I want her not only to see the opportunity being open to her, I want her to see the opportunity to rise in the ranks there too. And that's the thing I hope I see. And I hope that she gets to live in a world where she never has to question, did I get it because I'm a girl, or did I not get it because I'm a girl? You know, did I get it because I'm qualified? And that's the world I hope my kids live in, whether that's because of race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, abilities. Get it because you're qualified. And I hope someday we get to that world.
Absolutely. And kind of what you said earlier, it's get it because you are who you are, right? We're not having to change who we are to adapt ourselves to that environment. The environment makes sense to that, being that person. I think that's incredibly powerful. So, one last question. You know, and I look at your roles, and I look at your history now, and hear you talk today, and obviously you've been blessed with a lot of opportunities to impact the globe, and that continues today in your current role. So, last question is just what impact do you hope to have on the world?
You know, I am Jewish. We believe in tikkun olam, leaving the world better than you found it, the campsite better than you found it. I guess that's my biggest hope in everything I've done is that, you know, that I leave the earth better than I found it. You know, I surely don't have all the answers. I'd be a very affluent woman if I did, but I like to be at the table where I get to at least have the discussion. And I hope that long after I'm gone, something I did made a difference.
I think that's noble. And I will tell you, Caryl, that you know, on behalf of the operational arm of Walmart, let me tell you, I appreciate the work you're doing to help the betterment of the world. And I mean that quite literally. I think that's an extremely honorable mission for your life, and I appreciate what you're doing and the impact you're having. I'm going to push on Dr. Fraser to get you here in person one day because I still want to have that lunch so we can work out the ringtone situation because I really want to have my own ringtone on my phone. So with that, Caryl, on behalf of myself, on behalf of Iowa Wesleyan University and our business students that are here today and the business students that are going to watch this podcast, I want to thank you for your time. I know you're extremely busy lately and really appreciate you taking some time out to share your wisdom and insights into what's really an incredibly important topic started back in 1869 by Bell Babb Mansfield. So can you help me thank Caryl M Stern, please, for being here today. All right. So thank you, Caryl. Hope you have a great one, and look forward to meeting you in person. And I'll get that ringtone. So it looks like we're out of time.
Right down your alley, wasn't it? Yeah. You need to be the CEO someday. Oh, well, no, UNICEF. We can do that.
That makes me excited to go for it. Job shadowing her. I would love that. Let's go over here. We'll have a snapshot of